One. Welcome back to ESBR Boxing's YouTube channel. Delighted as always to be joined by Elliot Grigg. We have just seen Dillian Whyte beat EBENEZER TETTEH inside at the end of the seventh round before the start of the eighth round in an entertaining fight, a fight that went longer than we expected it to. Elliot, give us your instant reaction to what we've just seen. A tougher night's work for Dillian Whyte than many expected it to be.
Yeah. I mean, I did the final predictions. This went for sort of 5-6 in what I thought would be an underwhelming fight. And to be honest with you, it kind of played out like that in some ways. I think. I mean, it sound harsh, but at some points it looked like sort of two uncles at a barbecue having a throwdown meal. It looked like other people had compared it to a white collar. I think it's far, far and away off world level. I think that Tete, I don't want to cast any aspersions, but Tete and White are supposed to be the same age, but I'm not convinced necessarily by that either. Tete looked really old and really slow. Dillian White looked not as old, but still looked slow. Didn't look like any power. Was sort of chopping away. Hit Tete on the back of the head quite a few times. I noticed as well, and also seemed to hit him with a low blow at one point. But it seemed like the enthusiasm for it, even in the room, wasn't really there. And then as it was going along, the enthusiasm for it from the sort of viewers, and we were obviously watching it together outside of this, also seemed to sort of wane a bit as well. So I think my immediate reaction is I don't think that was the shop window that Dillian White hoped for. I don't think it's going to put him in a position that he'd hoped for either. It wasn't the kind of audition that was positive. Um, yeah, and I'm not convinced from the back of that we'll see his next one will be in a big fight. I don't think it will be, no.
Yeah, and I also just think tonight what was supposed to happen was White stops Tete in two, 3 rounds. Obviously, many people on these shores know Tete as the man who fought Daniel Dubois quite a while ago, a young Daniel Dubois, and got ironed out in a round. And White, obviously, kind of the fight's gone 7 full rounds tonight. He's probably won every round possibly, but he's not knocked Tete down. Tete's just been knackered at the end of the seventh round, and his corner have said that's probably enough. You're not going to win the fight. That's enough. I mean, would I'm not convinced White would have stopped Tete, either by kind of TKO or KO, if I'm honest. I just feel like the way it was going to get stopped was by Tete's corner throwing in the towel or just saying that's enough. You're not going out for another round. I couldn't help but be a bit, I don't want to say nostalgic, but look at tonight and think this is a guy who was in a really thrilling fight with Joseph Parker, won the fight, two thrilling fights with Derek Chisora, won both of those fights. I just couldn't help but think when you compare that to now, and the fact Dillian White is 36, he's not 46. It's quite the decline, and maybe it's just a mixture of inactivity or what it is. But I just think it's not great, and I'm not sure it's looking great. My next question to you, Elliot, is what does happen next? Dillian White currently, he's not doesn't seem to be allowed to fight in the UK, which is a problem. He's not with a big promoter, with a Frank Warren or an Eddie Hearn or a Ben Schlom. That's another problem. And he's not given us a very good performance. So that's kind of three problems there. I caught some of the post-fight interview he was doing, and he mentioned, he'd love to be on a Riyadh season card. And I think possibly that's why he's still in boxing, is because now it's a good time to be a heavyweight boxer with Turki Al-Sheikh's involvement. What do you see what do you see happening next for Dillian White? Not necessarily kind of opponents, but do you see him possibly getting on a Riyadh season card or not so much?
You know what? I think no. I think you hit the nail on the head really there by saying that that's obviously what he wants. I think put yourself in a position where you almost audition for one of those cards, get maybe like I don't think he's a headline fighter anymore. Don't get me wrong. I don't think he is that. I don't think he'll headline one of those Riddick cards. But you're looking at it going, if AJ Dubois happened again, would he get an undercard slot on that? You're looking at an undercard slot essentially on a Riddick, aren't you? If you're Dillian White, frankly. But I look at I look at the top 15, and I don't really, to be honest with you, have him beating any of the names kind of on there. I'm not saying he'd fight someone like Fabio Wood. Obviously, managed Fabio, didn't he? But like, even those names, those people that are coming up, I'd back them to blast him well out of the way. And they're sort of sitting kind of like around 10. Anyone in the top 10, I think, handles him convincingly. Even someone like Lawrence Okoli, who just started a heavyweight, batters him. Frankly, I really believe that. So I'm really struggling from a kind of who do you match him with perspective, unless you're sort of looking at like a tragic sort of Chisora three somewhere in kind of Ireland or Gibraltar. I really don't see how you match him. I don't see how you sell him. I don't see how you match him. I think part of me thinks that maybe the only prayer you'd have of getting on a Riddick card is if somehow Turkey and his team think that they can maybe market Wilder versus White or something. I mean, obviously Wilder's been really unappealing, hasn't he? Recently in recent cards is really sort of unimpressive as well. But whether they can see maybe something like that over the line, But it's just it's the fitness and the speed of Dillian Whyte. You look at these heavyweights that are coming through. You look at the heavyweights at the top of the division now. He's miles away from that. So I really think with the power and the speed and athleticism those guys have, it's a stoppage loss of Dillian Whyte if he fights anyone inside the top 15.
Yeah, yeah, and I think what's a bit kind of sad is that possibly before tonight we would have kind of had conversations about what would happen if Dillian Whyte fought a Michael Hunter or an Otto Wallin or an F.A. Ajagba, and we could have had a conversation about that. But now it's more like what happens if Dillian Whyte fights Johnny Fisher or David Adelaide? Because I can't sit here
Yeah.
now and say Dillian Whyte would definitely beat David Adelaide or would definitely beat Johnny Fisher because I don't know. I'm not.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be confident. So we'll see.
Fisher
Dillian
walk
Whyte,
through him, man, mate. I really do. I think Fisher would just step on the front. I think he'd blast him out there. I really think that.
yeah.
Based on what we saw tonight, I think Fisher would just have too much for him.
I can't disagree with that. I just think White now looks, yeah, I just think the power doesn't seem to be what it was. The speed as well, I just don't think wasn't great. So we'll see what happens. I just think one thing about Dillian White, I agree with you. He's probably, I'm not convinced we're going to see him in like a big headline fight again. We'll see, but I just think he's going to possibly have to be in a kind of a big chief support fight to work his way back into contention of a big fight, and we'll see what happens. Just to kind of end things, Elliot, I'll throw a couple more names at you just for fun, and just because we do want this to video to get to 8 minutes for monetization reasons. Um, you mentioned Lawrence Okoli, you mentioned Derek Chisora. If Chisora White 3 happened, would you have a prediction there? I feel like first fight was fantastic. A lot of people thought Chisora won. Second fight, very entertaining as well. White won that one by stoppage. Third fight, I don't think is kind of out the question. What do you think would happen?
You know what? This is going to come across as probably lunacy to some people, but I actually back Chisora. I really would. And the reason I say that is because he's come off a victory over Joe Joyce, a UD victory over Joe Joyce as well. He's gone 10 rounds to Joe Joyce, who, a couple of fights ago, we're talking about, will Joyce take out AJ? So literally, like, that's a good win. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think Joyce has somewhat declined since Zhang sort of got hold of him, don't get me wrong, but equally, that's still a credible victory. We've seen he can go rounds. And I think someone like Chisora will almost, we kind of saw it tonight with Tete, like kept going forward, kept coming forward. He'll do that, but he'll actually also just throw as well. And I think, to be honest with you, it'd make for a decent fight. And I actually would probably back him. I really would. I just think, weirdly, I think he's kind of seemingly fitter at the stage of his career than Dillian Whyte is. Don't get me wrong, I think he may get caught. He got caught violently, didn't he, in the first one? But I think the second one, sorry. But I think, yeah, I still think I've backed as well. I would lean slightly towards Chisora, but it'd still be tight because of his age, maybe sort of 60-40, 55-45. Still be a close fight. But I would lean towards Chisora, yeah, from what we saw tonight and what we've kind of seen from Dillian Whyte since the Fury fight.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I think another factor about tonight was what sort of shape was Dillian White in. I don't think he looked like this. I don't think he looked in great shape, if I'm honest. Final question. You did mention a name there that I did have in my head, so I'm going to ask you about that one. Not sure I see it happening, but I think we could because it's two big names in British boxing. Dillian White versus Joe Joyce. Joe Joyce, obviously, he's been ringside at events recently. He's going to fight on. Um, that fight, look, maybe I think if Dillian White was allowed to fight in the UK, I think that fight's a possibility. I genuinely do. Thoughts on that one, Ellie? It would be two fighters in decline, but yeah, what would your thoughts be on that one?
It's a tough one because Joe Joyce is so slow, like boxing, but he's also relentless coming forward. And I wonder how much Zhang took out of him. Could Dillian White stop Joe Joyce? Would be one question. If he landed on Joe Joyce, could he stop him? A couple of fights ago, you go absolutely not. Of course he couldn't. People are talking about Joyce taking Wilder's power. There's intrigue there. Maybe he could, but I actually would back Joyce again. The reason I'd back Joyce is just from the pace of fight. I think he'd just be too relentless for Dillian White. I think he'd really sort of grind him down. We've seen Dillian even when he was kind of more towards his peak, tire sort of midway through fights. And I think Joyce would just be so relentless that if Dillian didn't sort of catch him and get him out there in the sort of first 3 rounds, he'd eventually just sort of kind of do what he did to Parker, really, just sort of grind him and grind him, and there'd be a sort of a blow over stoppage. So I'd back if over 12 rounds, especially, I'd back Joe Joyce.
Yeah, we'll see. Look, I think regardless of what anyone says about Dillian White, he's still a big name. I think when kind of if his fight was to get announced, I think people would be interested to see who that was against and would tune in. But we'll see what happens. Not the best performance from Dillian White, and there are question marks over his future as a heavyweight contender. Elliot, good to be joined by you as always. Appreciate it. I know it's late on a Sunday night, not a Saturday night tonight, so both got work in the morning. But thank you very much for your time, and I'll speak to you again very soon.
Thank you very much. As always, guys, thank you very much for watching.